Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Corey Webb, and I'm the Marketing Director here at Turn Zero, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar titled, How to Master the Tough Talks Every CSM Needs to Have, Even If You Hate Conflict. Before we get started today, I do want to remind everyone that we are recording today's presentation, and we'll be sending out an email tomorrow with a link to the recording that you can view on demand. Throughout the presentation, please submit your questions for Ryan, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of this webinar. We have also open chat, and we'll be having some prompts for you there and a poll. So encourage you to engage with us as we do the webinar. Now I'm pleased to introduce to you our speaker today. We have Ryan Johansson. Ryan is the founder of Stress Less and Get More Done, which is a live step-by-step training program guaranteed to help employees build the skills they need to beat burnout, work smarter, and crush their goals. We're happy to have Ryan back. He's one of our most popular webinar speakers for the past couple of years. So welcome, Ryan. And with that, I will kick it off to you.
Thank you so much, Corey. I'm glad to be here. It's just watching all the numbers creep up. Thanks for taking some time out of the day, everyone. Really excited for this topic. It's one that I think is underrepresented in a lot of the CS atmosphere, and it's something that can be really helpful, not only for work, but also it's something you can take home and improve your home life with as well. So very excited for this topic. And just a little bit more about me. I'm based in the Boston area. I'm a former CS leader. I run my own company, helping teams, like Corey said, beat burnout, work smarter, and crush their goals. And if you've joined a session with me before, I focus a lot on stress and productivity. And people sometimes ask me, why are you into this communication skills as well? Because I think it's a very important part of that piece where you can be very good at managing your stress or very good at running your day, but we all work with people, and that can be a major source of stress. So this is something that not only can help you focus on the right things, but also improve your relationships. Now, I want to get things started with a little bit of a poll. And I like to make this fairly interactive. So I'm going to come to you in the chat and have you participate from time to time. So don't be a stranger. And to get you warmed up, let's have you throw in the chat. Where are you dialing in from, zooming in from, whatever you want to call it? And what did you have for lunch? And like I said, I'm in Boston, and I had a burrito for lunch. That's usually what I have for lunch every day. Creature of habit. Okay, we got some people going, and the more we hear from you, the better. It helps me focus. Okay, wow, I saw a bagel. I saw Dartmouth, Mass. I went to UMass Dartmouth. That was really cool to see. Oh, we got people firing off. This is awesome. This is what I love to see. Okay, so while we do all of that, let's get a quick poll going. I promise this is going to make sense, and I'm going to come back to why I asked this, but how many siblings do you have? Do you have one? Any only child, one sibling, 2 to 3, 4, 4 to 8, over 9. Damn. That's wild. Okay. Okay, so I don't want to know if anyone wants to guess what bucket I fall into, and I promise I'm going somewhere with this.
I'll give it a few more seconds just to see a few more poll responses coming in.
Yes, you're all automatically muted. Yes, I am an only child. So this is kind of the point I'm trying to get across is this discussion that we're going to cover today and this topic of having difficult conversations is extremely nuanced. It's not a plug and play. It can very much depend on maybe how you grew up, how you're tempered. Me personally, I grew up an only child, and I'm a pretty introverted guy. So naturally, I wasn't a huge fan of things like conflict. And it reminds me of a story when I was a kid. My friend invited me over for a play date, and he was one of 4 boys. And it was like nothing I've ever seen. I went over their house, and all of a sudden, people are punching each other. And I thought it was just the end of the world. They all hate each other, and it was going to be a really bad day. Until I found out that's just kind of how the world works. So just a funny example to say, as someone who really wasn't a big fan of conflict, doesn't come by it naturally. This is something that I identified in my life that it was causing me a lot of stress because, like you, I was a CSM. You have to deal with lots of different customers, stakeholders. So it's something where the good news is you can learn some skills here, and it's not something you're either gifted with or you can never get lucky with. So let's talk about a couple of things. So why this is so important is if you want, let's see in the chat, does anybody want any of these things? Do you want a higher salary? Do you want a promotion? Do you want more resources at work in a time where literally everybody is doing more with less and it's never been more brutal? I think that should hit home to all of us. Do you want to call out bad behavior? That's another one that's fairly common and helpful for this skill set. The other one too, where I talked about being at home. Do you want your partner to help out around the house a little bit more? Have your kids do their homework, or even a better price on a car? Well, here's the thing. What do all of these have in common? They are a difficult conversation away. And a way to think about it is it's something where it might seem really challenging, but it's worth thinking about how we can put these into play. Now, the thing with difficult conversations is why they can be so challenging is the stakes tend to be fairly high, as well as the emotions. And those are the two different things going on that can create a lot of challenges. And it gets in the way fairly often. I always like starting out with one of my favorite quotes here, and this is from Tim Ferriss. He wrote The 4-Hour Work Week, really interesting guy. And he said, a person's success in life can usually be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations he or she is willing to have. And what you can think about is most of these things that you're looking for are a difficult conversation away. And we're going to give you some concrete things that you can do and make you more comfortable with these conversations, because maybe you think about it and it's awkward, and sometimes they are, but if you think about it in a different way, maybe it makes you a little bit more comfortable and confident going into these. Now, I've talked about all the great things that happen when you get more comfortable with this skill set, but let's hear from you. What gets in the way? Why do you not maybe speak up when you know you should, or ask for something that you're worried about having that conversation? What are some of the things that get in the way for you? Comfort, definitely. Overthink, rejection, fear. Yeah. Ego, being judged, not caring. That's, yeah, I get that. Imposter syndrome. Yeah, I get that. Okay, so I put a couple of these together, but it's tends to be some challenge with the way that we think about it. So potentially you don't want to damage a relationship. You don't want to come off as rude or pushy. You want to be known as a team player, especially as CSMs. A lot of people are counting on us, and it's a challenging thing to say no. Maybe you get nervous with it or you're uncomfortable doing. Now, here's where it can be a problem, is what it leads to is in these conversations, if you are delaying them or not happening, one or two things or both of these can happen. Is you either shut down, and I think someone said not caring. You get to that point where it seems meaningless, you start to feel helpless, and that can lead you down a difficult cycle. The other thing too is maybe you let that go on for too long and then you blow up and explode on someone because you've been holding that back for so long and you overreact to a minuscule situation on paper. This also leads to being more stressed out because you're dealing with more challenging situations and maybe holding it in a little bit more than you should. If you take on too much and you can't say no to people, you become stretched thin. It can strain your relationships. And the worst thing is if you keep saying yes to things despite not wanting to because you are either uncomfortable with it or haven't been taught a better way, is you might feel like a doormat. And worst of all, you feel like you're settling for less in some of these situations. So it is something where the struggle is real. And this is something that it's not a thing where it's a personal character flaw. Everyone has some degree of challenge with something like this. And here's why I think this matters so much. And I had a CEO and he had a great line that I started to adopt is that you need to participate in your own rescue mission. And unfortunately, the world isn't always fair and we can't always count on other people to do the right thing and stand up for us. So it's very much a situation where you need to be able to advocate for yourself. And the important thing to remember is that it's where you can actually do this for yourself. And it really matters. And what really holds a lot of people back is maybe you have that fear and you're worried about judgment or something like that. But you can do this and people won't hate you. The other thing too is you got to remember that people aren't mind readers. A lot of the times I'll work with clients or have conversations with even friends. And one of the things I always bring up is, well, have you talked to this person about it? And they say no. So a lot of the times we project and fortune tell a situation and it's not exactly how it is once you uncover by having those conversations. So I want you for a second to close your eyes for like 15 seconds and think of what is the number one thing getting in your way. Whatever you just typed out, whatever you thought about, I want you to think about that quickly because we're going to change it and instill some new beliefs in you because we want to really empower you today. Okay. Confidence. Okay, so here are your new beliefs. And I want you, if you have a pen and paper nearby, write this down or say it out because I can give you every single tip in the world. But if you don't believe this at its core, it's not going to do anything for you. So it's a situation where you need to really start to own this. and know that you can have these tough conversations and still be respectful and kind. It's very much a win-win situation where it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be abrasive or aggressive to advocate for yourself and start to get what you're looking for in situations. The other thing too is when you have these conversations and you're honest with people, you tend to create more win-win situations and you create better relationships along the way. So I want you to just take that in and make that your new belief system. Now, I'm going to share all these slides, but it's really important once you kind of change that way of thinking about it, where you put everything in the way, just keep an open mind because this can make a huge difference for you. Now, I want to go through 3 separate difficult conversations that every CSM has that I promised. And I think these tend to be the top 3. And I'd love to hear from you, maybe one that I might have missed or another situation that you often face as a CSM. So the first, I believe, is when you're trying to push back and set boundaries with someone. It's when there's a bunch of good examples here that I'll walk through. The second is resolving interpersonal conflicts. This is a huge one for CSMs because we work with lots of different departments. We work with lots of different stakeholders, ton of conversations and challenges. I see number 2 is hard. Yes, it is. And then 3 is commercial discussions. And maybe you have revenue responsibility. That seems to be a growing trend in CS. It was something I just grew up with and always had. But even if you don't handle renewals, there's going to be some valuable things in there for you career-wise. So stick around for that part too. So the first part we want to talk about is when you can push back and set boundaries. And this is a challenging situation that you probably face in a lot of different scenarios. And why specifically can this be such a problem, or what are some of the things that the missteps that we might commonly make here? So the first one out of the gate is when you avoid it or delay it. And this is something that can be done out of comfort. But the problem is that when you do that, these situations, despite how much you want it to get better, they tend to get worse and worse over time. And one of the best analogies I've ever heard with this that made me a lot more confident with conflict is thinking about it as you and the other person sitting at a table. And at that table, it's surrounded and covered in trash. And you're both noticing it, you're both uncomfortable, but you're pretending it like it's not there. Now, the way to think about conflict is that you're going to face discomfort either way. The first option is that you avoid discomfort temporarily, and your situation gets much worse. The other option is that you face that discomfort for a short amount of time, and then the situation can get much better over time because you've either resolved a conflict, gotten to the root cause of an issue, and the situation can improve from there. It's almost like going for a run when you don't feel like it, or any other change that you dread, and then after you do it, you actually feel a lot better. There's a different way to think about it. Do you want your discomfort now or even more later? The next thing that I see with a lot of CSMs, and this is my own experience too, I'm not talking down to you, I've lived every damn thing here. So the other one is the automatic yes. As CSMs, we are known as helpers. We want everyone to find us valuable. We are just driven by nature to help people, which is a great thing. Don't get me wrong, but it can backfire on you sometimes. One thing that made a huge difference for me here was understanding that every time I said yes to something, I'm saying no to something else. And like anything else, think about yourself as a software engineer. They can only build so many features. So you have to think of the throughput you actually have in a day and make sure that you're spending your day in the right place, because that leads to a lot of challenges where you become suddenly spread way too thin, you're taking on too much, and then you start to feel like a failure and it puts you in a really negative state quickly. And the third is it can lead to resentment if you're not speaking up about a challenging issue and people have no idea that's often the case. Then you might be short with them or frustrated and they have no idea. So it's almost a dishonest and unkind thing to not let people know situations like this. And we'll talk through very respectful and classy ways to have these discussions, but it's very important to get to the root of these things instead of being fake about it, to be honest. Now, here are 3 strategies I want you to consider when you're in a situation where you have to push back or set boundaries. And they all apply together. And like I said, you're going to have all these slides, so put it together. And this is a lot more wordy than I prefer to be, but it can help you conceptualize some of the things we're going to talk about. So the first is saying no. I often hear things like no is a complete sentence, and people come off pretty abrasive and aggressive about it. And that's something where if you've ever been on the other end of that, that doesn't feel very good. And no one likes just a complete no. But on the other hand, you can't really waffle things and just say yes to everything because you're uncomfortable and you just want to make another person happy, even if it means you're going to miss your kid's soccer game that night. Now, when you're saying no, there's a three kind of tenets you want to keep in mind. The first is being honest about it and not trying to hide behind something else, and just letting the person know exactly where you stand and why you're saying no. The second is you want to give the person a concrete reason. There's a really interesting study from a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. And in that, they did what they called the Xerox experiment, where in that they walked up to someone at a library making photocopiers. This is a very outdated sentence, but they walked up and said, "Hey, do you mind if I cut you?" And 60% of people, believe it or not, said yes to that request. And then they made this small change, and then they got 90% of people to agree to the request. All they did differently was they said, "Do you mind if I cut you? I'm late for a meeting." And by giving a reason, people were that much more likely to be okay with that request. So that's something where it helps people understand where you're coming from as another human. It's a quick change, but it makes a massive difference when you're communicating. The third, I know that we all want to be great people persons and help everyone out. So I'm going to give you another option that you can have here. If you do unfortunately have to say no, a really good thing you can do is offering alternatives. So a good example for this might be if you ran a report for a sales rep and they were like, "This is amazing. Can you do this for 40 of my customers?" You might say, "Well, no, I'm not able to do that. But if you want, I'm happy to sit down with you one afternoon and show you how to do it on your own." So once again, you're not being rude, you're still being helpful, but you're not taking on more than you should and something that's completely not on you. Now, we've talked about some tactics. Let's talk about the tone that you want to use in some of these conversations. And it's assertive communication. If you've never heard of it before, the good way to put this is what it is. It's really the happy medium between what you want and what other people want. And there's three main tenets to it. It's that you want to be direct with the person about what you're asking for. You want to be firm about what you're asking for and not waffling about it. And the last part is you want to be respectful. And I'm going to repeat something I said in my first Churn Zero webinar 3 years ago, because it's a good way to explain this, is I'll give the example of what one sounds like versus another. So the first would say, if I'm going to be indirect about something, I would say, "Hey, Milton, would you mind maybe turning down the radio? Other people might be bothered by it. Like, no worries, but maybe think about it." Versus, "Hey, Milton, how's it going? Would you do me a huge favor and please turn the radio down? I'm having a little bit of trouble concentrating today. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it." In that, that's the assertive version. You've asked for the same thing, but you're being more respectful. You're being clear. You're being direct with what you're looking for. The caveat here is that we're all people. Not everyone's going to march to your drum every day, but it's very important to at least start that conversation and have an entry point for things like this. Now, this last point is for every single challenging conversation you're ever going to have. Don't do it over text. Don't do it over Slack. Don't do it over email, especially if you're a manager. I think that's the most spineless thing you can do. If you have a difficult conversation, just either hop on a quick Zoom or a meeting, because so much gets lost in translation. And it can be a really challenging thing. And even if it's a little bit more uncomfortable, being a human about it gets things moving a lot quicker because we miss a lot. Things can get misinterpreted. So it's very important with any conversation like this is just take it offline and you're going to have a much better result. Now, I'm going to do a live example of pushing back on something that came up with someone I was talking to, is CSM. It might be on this call. And she had a client that was very needy. And I'm sure, has anyone ever had a needy client? I don't see, oh, I see David with the Milton one. Okay, yeah, never. So we all have those clients. And while we want to help people, it can get to a point where it's not in either of our interests. So in that example, if they were asking her to enter support tickets for her, which isn't a good use of her time or really anyone's time because it would just duplicate work. So I'm going to give a sample script and we're going to talk about some of the things I just talked about it and how it comes in. So you can just see a live example of this and feel free to copy this, but like anything else, it takes nuance. You want to adjust it, make it come from yourself. But here's some of these concepts in real life. So hey, Name, having me submit this isn't the most effective way to get this solved. Number one, I'm being honest. If I'm ever off or tied up, it will end up taking longer. I'm giving a reason. The best route is to enter the ticket on your own. This helps everyone get their eyes on it so we can get a fastest resolution. We're putting it in their interest. And then, hey, here's a quick how-to video. That's something where you're offering an alternative and you're still being helpful. The other optional thing, if you want to give another alternative, is, hey, if it's a complete fire, feel free to forward me this case. And this is something where you're being very clear and direct with someone. And like I said, have this conversation rather than just sending the email, because that leaves it up for misinterpretation. But you just want to explain where you're coming from and why that's in that person's interest. And it can go a real long way. Now, here are some of the benefits of this. Clearly, if you can even just get that quick win of not entering someone's support tickets or being your customer's whipping boy or woman, here are some of the things that happen that go really well here. When you're able to push back and set boundaries with people in a more effective way that's still respectful and strong, you aren't spreading yourself as thin. So I would agree. I'm sure you would all feel the same way. Running support tickets isn't probably the best use of your day. And the challenge is that trains your customers to see you in that light, that you're going to take care of support tickets for all the time. And that's not the best use of any CSM's time. And I'll die on that hill. But what happens is when you don't do that, you have more time for more important high value activities. Maybe you're designing a new process for your team, you're preparing for a renewal, or anything like that. And the other thing too is we tend to get in our head about these situations, and we'll completely have the argument in the shower of how every bad thing is going to happen. Usually in reality, it's never as big of a deal, as, at least in my mind. Things are never as bad as I make them out to be in my mind sometimes. So in a lot of cases, if you're being clear, respectful, it's usually not that big of a deal. And people are like, okay, I understand. Thanks for doing that. If you follow those rules, it makes it a lot easier. Now, another thing worth remembering too, would you rather have an uncomfortable conversation for 2 minutes or do 2 hours of work first that you shouldn't be doing? So what would be the better trade-off there? So I know it's uncomfortable, but we'll talk about how you can get some quick wins here. Now, a couple lessons here is this is so important because you need to protect your time and your peace as much. It's very important. And with boundaries, the earlier you set them, the easier it is. Because if you've been doing something for a year and then you suddenly say, hey, I'm not doing this anymore, then it creates an even more challenging situation. I like the analogy of the Titanic and the iceberg. If you're far enough away, you only have to adjust the wheel a little bit. Whereas if you get really close to it, then it's a major transition. The other thing too is I don't want to blow anyone's mind, and I know this too, but maybe there's things that you do that bother other people. So always looking for some feedback of, hey, maybe I got it wrong, or maybe I'm seeing it this way. And if you come in as a genuine person trying to work with someone and being respectful, these tend to go a lot stronger, a lot better, and you're coming from a place of empathy. Next one, interpersonal conflicts. I'm sure this is probably a huge one for most people. I saw this the chat kind of light up on number 2. Let's talk about a couple of steps you can take here. And here are some of the problems that definitely come across in situations like this. And the first one is coming in too hot. I'm sure we've all been guilty of this before. I always like telling about this rule, the 20-minute rule, where you don't respond to an email that pisses you off for 20 minutes. It can probably save your career. But what happens here is if you go into one of these conversations and you start at a 10 because it doesn't matter, but maybe you're just really upset about the person, it's been a long issue, you set yourself back even further, especially if that other person comes from a place of hostility. You end up butting heads, and then you're even worse off than you began. So keeping a cool head can make a huge difference, and we'll tell you how to do that in a second. The other thing too is thinking it's you against the world. Trust me, as an only child, it still bruises my ego when I don't always get my way, but I always realize that you need to work with other people to make sure that things are successful. So going in with that attitude of you need to always get your way is not going to serve you long term. And then the last thing is when you don't have objectivity around a situation, it can create a lot of challenges. So if something is really right in front of you, you might not see certain things, and your perception might be off or things like that. And it's happened to me plenty of times where I've jumped to a conclusion and I was 100% wrong, and I really regretted how I acted. And it's something that you can't always make up, and you can really damage a relationship. So taking a second to step back makes a huge difference. Now, here are some strategies when you're having these conversations when it comes with conflict. I'm not going to get into, what department you have the most challenges with or whether it's customers, but these are universal principles. Even if it's, at home, it can make a huge difference. So here are some of the things that I like to do with these conversations that I really, put a lot of effort into. Is the first thing I like to do is map out the situation. What I mean by that is get a pen to paper, because a couple of good things happen you first of all slow your brain down. You start to see things more objectively. It takes a lot of the emotion out of the situation, so it can slow your mind down, and you're not as kind of stressed and angry about something. The next part you want to figure out is what's the history of the situation? How did we get here? Because usually people don't start waking up their day trying to ruin your day. Maybe you played some part in it. And if you can admit that, that can help you get to a resolution a lot quicker, and maybe help that other person get to follow you along as well. The other thing too is when these conversations get particularly challenging and emotional, you want to make sure you distinguish what's the facts versus what's the feelings. Good way to do this, just draw a line down a piece of paper and then write down the fact of what happened. So the fact would be maybe you were not included on a happy hour or something like that. And then you could write down how you feel about it. So you want to always start with X happened and why is the feeling about it when you have that conversation. Because if you're just debating feelings, that's something that can lead to a lot of challenges, and it makes a lot of, it stresses you out even more. And the last part is you want to have a very clear defined goal of what you're getting out of that conversation. Because if you do have a history and these are truly challenging, tense conversations, what can happen is things can get emotional. Maybe someone takes a cheap shot, and then you worry more about winning the argument rather than getting the point across or getting it right. So it's always helpful to have that to anchor back on when you're in these discussions instead of kind of falling down the rabbit hole of whatever thing happened. The second part with a situation like this is collaborating with the other person. And the first step I like to take is to take time to see the other side and ask myself. I remember me and a sales rep were having some challenges. I don't think anyone can relate to that, but my boss kind of brought that point up and it made me think about it. And I sat down and was like, okay, I can understand why he might not be really thrilled to have me join right away because he's worked 2 years for this deal. And when I thought about that, that was the first part I brought up in that conversation. So I helped really broker the conversation because I was understanding where he was coming from. So when you do that, you come in the conversation with a place of empathy and understanding. And if nothing else, you start to anticipate some of the counterpoints that come up in those conversations. The other part too is finding common ground can go a really long way. When you sit down with a person, and you can always anchor it back into what is the mutual goal. Because most of these conversations at work, you tend to want to have the same goals, but you might disagree on the way to get there. And then the last thing too, they call this leading with the chin in boxing, where one thing I would just blatantly do is before I would bring into my spiel of what was going on, I would always ask, hey, am I doing anything to feel like I'm letting you down or bothering you? And just opening up the conversation that way and taking the time to listen and address that feedback before I launched into what I needed to talk about, because that made it a dialogue instead of just yelling at each other, which is frustrating, it's exhausting, and it tends to go nowhere but downhill. And the last thing is, I want you to approach these conversations with a sense of curiosity. And one of the best things you can do is just start with asking for that person's input. Instead of saying, you did this, X, Y, Z, when someone feels attacked, they're going to shut down immediately. So if you take a step back and you're truly just having a conversation to understand that person's perspective, and then have that as your starting point to launch that conversation, you're going to get a lot further than that. Another thing too is find someone else to talk it over with, because maybe you get a little distance from the situation. And one thing that's a really happy trick is if it's a person at work that you really struggle to work with, find someone that works really well with them and just ask them, hey, what's your secret? And that's something I've personally done before. It can be really helpful because this is not in the scope of this conversation, but understanding personality types can go a really long way. What one person loves can drive another person completely crazy. There's a really good book I recommend called Surrounded by Idiots. And that was another helpful thing for me to understand that everyone's wired differently, and it's not a good or a bad thing. And quite often, if everyone was built just like you, it might be, not the best world. So that kind of diversity of ideas and personality is actually a good thing, and there's strength there. So it's really important to just, some people are the way they are, and you want to find the best way to work with them. So more than anything else, it's about the more you can meet someone on your level or on their level, it's going to move the conversation a lot quicker. Deck will definitely be shared, Megan. Okay, now let's go in an example here. So this is one that I remember distinctly blowing up about this exact situation one time, being left off a call. And I sent a nasty email to my colleague, and I had to apologize, and I felt like such an idiot after. And I'm sure, I don't know if anyone's, I'll admit all my flaws here. Maybe that's happened to you before. So let's take all the principles we just talked about and apply in this situation that can be potentially tense. And this is simple. So, hey, I saw you at a meeting with Chipotle. Chipotle is one of my favorite places ever. Can you help me understand why I wasn't included on that? The answer, maybe you think that that person's trying to screw you and they don't value you and they're hiding things from you. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe it was a bad week. You want to find that out before you continue the conversation. So that's a few of the principles we just talked about. Coming in with curiosity, trying to understand their point of view. Now, the next part, I get you have a lot going on, but I need us to work together as a team so nothing falls through the cracks and we can grow this account. Now I'm going back to the finding the mutual wins between the team. And I'm asking for the request in a very clear, concise way. Now, next, my ask in a very respectful manner, you make sure that you can add me to all the invites going forward. Something where it's pretty straightforward and you're having this conversation in a healthy way rather than blowing up on the person or just getting frustrated by it and not saying anything and complaining to someone else. You want to just resolve that tension right away, or because it's going to make a huge difference. Because one of the worst things too is your customers can sense it. And I had this is definitely a side point, but I had a customer we worked with, and like that whole team would just fight each other every call. And me and my sales rep just loved hopping on, listening to these people go nuts on each other. It's just not a good look because people will talk about you in a webinar one day. But that's my aside point. Here are some of the benefits that have with something like this. Francois, the book is Surrounded by Idiots. I'll throw that in there too. So the benefits here is that it removes some of those strong emotions. You're trying to view it from a place of objectivity. The more you calm down and try and listen to stuff like this and understand, and it's going to remove some of that so you can have more of a dialogue instead of worrying about being right or wrong. The other thing too, saves you time and energy. We waste a lot of time in conflict. If you ever, like, I'd love to see in the chat, have you ever gone home and been thinking about what you meant to say to someone or the fight you're going to have tomorrow with a coworker? It takes so much mental energy and it sucks. So this is something where it's a little bit challenging up front, but just have it shower conversations. Yeah. But the other thing too here is like all of these situations, you can apply all these principles throughout. And the more you combine them, it can be very powerful. But like the assertive communication part, you're finding more win-win outcomes by having a dialogue rather than just getting annoyed at the person and not telling them what's bothering you or letting them continue to kind of smash through boundaries and let it get way worse. Okay. Some of the lessons here. Take the time to plan these out. When you're having a challenging conversation, maybe you just want to just jump into something. You got a frustrating email. You want to call that person, give them a piece of your mind, take a breath, do the 20-minute rule, and start to map out like how you'd want to cover that conversation. Because there's a lot at stake in that. You can potentially set yourself back or make the situation even worse. The other thing too, nothing makes a difficult conversation more easier and tolerable than trying to center it on those common goals. And that might be a really good entry point for you of, hey, we're both trying to grow this account because we're both comped the same way. So how can we figure out how to best work together? And that was something where anytime I had any challenge with the sales rep ever, that was the thing I brought it back. I was like, hey, I want to make money and you want to make money. Let's figure out how we can actually get this going. So oops. And then the other thing too, give people a little bit of grace. No one's perfect. We have bad days. Sometimes we get overly emotional or, we can be a dick or something like that. But remember that everyone's doing their best. The thing to watch out for is when it becomes a habit and it's nonstop. That's probably when it's a better time to intervene. Now, the part 3 commercial discussions. This is something where I'd love to see in the chat, like, are they being asked to go to their customers and increase prices? Because this seems to absolutely make a CSM skin crawl. And I'll talk about that. Okay. Yeah. Yep. That's annually. Okay. That's it's a lot of challenge for people. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if you have commercial responsibilities or not, but this is a challenging one. So I'm going to go through that. Okay. So here are some common mistakes, challenges, problems with this type of conversation. So one of the first is misunderstanding the leverage of a situation. What I mean by that is being unclear about what your bargaining power is in a renewal or any commercial discussion, whether you're going up for promotion, raise, anything like that. It can go in both directions. So either you over assume your value where you think you're going to get promoted, but you haven't hit any of the steps that you need to, and you're shocked that way. Or the other thing too is maybe you undervalue how much you've done, and like you're going for a big renewal, and just because everyone's budgets are tight, maybe you don't completely have the full picture on maybe your platform, whatever the hell it is saving that company $5 million a year, and it's one of their most important tools. If you haven't taken the time to understand that and document that, you might be potentially giving in too easy, cutting down your price, or leaving money on the table there, or just, there's a lot of different ways this can go wrong. So I'll go through once again. I'm pretty good about giving actionable tips and advice here. The other thing too is when you wing it. That's another, like where we talked about earlier. If you are not planning this stuff out, not having conversations with people, not taking the time to write it down, you're setting yourself up for surprises. How many people have ever walked into a renewal and you felt like you were prepped like the captain of the debate team, only to get sideswiped and find out like things that you had no idea were coming? We can't plan for every single thing, but there are some steps we can take to make this go a lot easier. Value exchange, love it. And then giving in too fast. This is something where like maybe these make you completely squeamish and you just want to get the deal done. And maybe what you do is you settle for less, and that can impact your wallet. It impacts your company too. So getting a little bit more comfortable with this has a direct monetary value for you, whether it's asking for a raise or anything like that. So you got to tough it out a little bit and learn how to get more confident and comfortable here. And we'll go through that. All right, few strategies here. The first is to show up with data. Be very specific. I hear this all the time, but let's make it actionable here. One of the first ones in knowing what matters. When I was in college, I'm a competitive, crazy person. I wanted to get straight A's. And I would go up to the teachers, and they all had office hours, and barely anyone ever went to them. Before the test, I would say, hey, what's going to be on the test? Where should I focus? What's important? And they would give me ABC. This is what you should focus on. And that helped me only focus on what I needed to and not do extra work. So what that allowed me to do, extrapolate that, whether you're looking for a promotion or you're onboarding a new customer and you're responsible for that renewal in 12 months, you need to find out what their success criteria is, how they're measured, and start putting a case together and mapping out every single win that you've had with them. Now, the way you do that is having documented value. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do this, but I'll say the exact live thing that we did at my company. And this helped us take this and a few other things, took our churn rate down by 33% in about 18 months. And what we did was in any of this, we started with a value hypothesis, and we put together like actual numbers on what our company was doing for them. So we could say, okay, you've rolled this model into production. You're now saving $4 million a year. We got them to agree to that. And then when we sent them that renewal quote, we included that win story in it too. So typically any procurement department, that if you have to talk with them, they just see line items, and few people actually do this. So this is something where you prove your worth automatically. And if they say, well, we don't want to spend an extra $500 on that, you can just clearly say, well, we're making you 100x that. Why is there an issue here? And another thing too is like the stand by your worth. If you have confidently delivered on what you need to do, you've done a really good job, make sure that you're standing ground with that, because it's very important. Now, another one, this is a little bit what we just talked about in the other part. Seeing the other side can make it really easy in a negotiation or a renewal, because what you can do is think of maybe the top 3 counterpoints that person's going to bring up. Maybe they say, we've reduced headcount, we're going through X, Y, and Z, or there's this challenge. Instead of letting that person bring it up, you say, hey, I know you're going through X, Y, and Z. So that person feels heard, they feel understood. You're starting with that. Now, by doing that, it makes the conversation a lot easier, and that can help explain the side that you're coming from. Because what we talked about, win-win, it doesn't mean that we're going to get every customer to completely agree, but it can make this process easier and more simple to follow. Now, the next is, I always liked when I was doing a renewal, I'd come up with 3 different outcomes ahead of time. I would write out, number 1, what's exactly what I want to get out of this scenario. This would be my dream outcome. Number 3 would be, what is the line that I will walk away from? This is just not acceptable. Then I would write out, what's number 2? What do I think is a perfect 50-50 win? And then the goal was always just, okay, let's find somewhere to hit between 1 and 2 and work the conversation accordingly. And this is another one where take the time to practice with someone. If you're negotiating large renewals, you want to make sure this is one of the most valuable things you can do. So either find someone on your team to like practice these things with, or practice with your boss or something like that, because it's the better you get at this. Obviously, it's a pretty clear line. The more money you make, and the more you help your company out. And the other thing too is what I like to call a cool off period. I've done multi-million-dollar negotiations that have gone fairly smooth, and I've done ones for 5K that were absolutely like pulling teeth. And one of the best things to put in your arsenal is where we talked about earlier. I had a VP of sales who was amazing at this. No matter how hostile someone would get, he would be the nicest person in the world. He'd be incredibly pleasant. So either the person would just give in, or they would completely seem like a maniac. And then he would say, okay, listen, this is starting to go down a direction where it's not being helpful. It's feeling a little personal. Why don't we just take 24 hours, cool off, and come back tomorrow? So that's something where you always have that chip in your back pocket to take a step away and help that person realize that maybe they're being completely over the top or ridiculous about a situation. So having that walk away line is really important in situations like that. So once again, very incredible, pretty tactical thing you can do in these situations. Another thing too, you can get backed in a corner and give into something really easy because you feel that time pressure. And maybe it's a half-hour call and you feel like, well, I have to get this taken care of. You don't have to do that, because think of any important negotiation. Think of a peace treaty. They're not done in a 30-minute Zoom call. It might take months, weeks, years. So it's something where don't feel like you have to get boxed into a corner because potentially you're agreeing to something that's not a good fit for you, or that's how you end up in a situation that can treat you poorly down the road. Let's go back to these people that have to increase their prices, the customers. So let's say you got a tough renewal coming up. Let's say your CFO has asked everyone, hey, could you please, we need, or not, I don't think CFOs say, could you please too often, but maybe they say we need to increase our customer price by 10%. And then you get your customer the day before this big renewal discussion, they say, hey, we need a 20% reduction to hit our budget this year. That's a tough situation. So that's a 30% swing. That's it might make your skin crawl a little bit, but let's talk about a little bit how to help this out. So you can just, I would just flat out say like, and there's a reason why you say this. I won't be able to go to my CFO and ask for this. This helps humanize the conversation and helps that person understand you have people to answer to. And I didn't mean to call it CFOs. My CFO is a really good guy too. But like with that, when you call it when you say that, it helps them realize that, okay, this person's just like me. They have someone to report to. That might make it a little bit more reasonable. Now, the next part is you say, hey, we've been a strong partner to your organization, and we've documented that our platform is responsible for over 3 million incremental revenue last year. So this is what makes your renewals easy. And it's not easy work, but when you get very diligent about capturing value and making sure you're doing that part right, that makes these conversations a lot more data-driven and fact-driven, because when you're arguing emotions, it can be really challenging for you. So, and then the last thing you can say that I would go to all the time in situations like this is, I like Greek yogurt. It's gone from like 99 cents to like $3 recently. And the cost of nearly everything has gone up in the past few years. So, maybe, I know that you're in a tight time. Maybe there's some scenarios we can work with to find the best way to go. And if you're sometimes, depending on your company, I don't know how much power you get with your negotiation, but you want to also, I didn't include this, but like putting down certain levers that you can pull. So maybe you can give them a better term if they do a multi-year. Maybe you can give them something else. So what's that's called in sales is a give get. So anytime you're giving away or giving concessions, it's about getting something in return, because what have I said a million times today? It's about finding win-wins. Wrapping up toward the end here. Thanks for sticking in here, folks. So the benefits are you're debating facts, not feelings. It's much easier. If anyone's ever gone to, I remember trying to get headcount when I was first running a CS team, and I would say, well, we're all overwhelmed and we're bored, like all these things. And I was arguing feelings. When I took the time to put together a strong business case, that conversation got a lot easier because I had facts and data. I said, if we hire this person, I'm going to bet you we can make it return 5x, which makes a huge difference. The other natural thing is if you get better at negotiation, you're going to make more money. That's a good thing. That's very American of me, but that's what I am. And then the other part too is it improves your confidence too. because I remember the first time I ever negotiated a salary, it's something like just like you, I was really squeamish about, and I was like, well, what if they pull the offer? So I did it, and it felt goddamn good. I'm not sure if anyone's ever done it before, but it feels very good. So even if you start small, it makes a big difference. So a couple last ones for you is always document your wins and make sure you have that case, whether that's what you do at work, whether that's what you do for your customers. The other part is have a game plan and practice. Make sure you're taking the time. It's one of the most high value things you can do. So get this part right and practice it, because like any difficult conversation, they're not easy, but if you get more reps, it becomes easier. You become more confident. Another thing too, now that you've taken, and let's say you take advice number one of pushing back on things, if you're not spending as much time on support tickets, you can spend more time on your renewals and make more money. So it's just no brainer, right? And then the other thing too, naturally, it's a major income accelerator. It's a very good skill. It makes a huge difference for you and your company. It's even, negotiating salary and things like that. It's very impactful for you. I want to end this with a couple different thoughts here. I don't know if anyone can. I'm hoping a few people get these references here, but they're quite outdated. I think these shows are both like 20 years old. But in the conversation spectrum, when you learn something like this, the downfall is that you can start to become a hammer and you see everything as a nail. This is not about always getting your way. This is about trying to find the happy medium, depending on the situation, depending on the background, between Milton from Office Space and Larry David. If you're not familiar with either of them, Milton and Office Space, that's one of the best movies ever. Definitely watch it. But in that, he's what you call a doormat. He just lets people push him around, move him in offices, and then he ends up burning the building down. So that's probably the worst case scenario of someone that won't have difficult conversations. On the other spectrum, one of my favorite shows ever, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David says whatever the hell's on his mind, and it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. So with anything like that, you want to make sure that you're finding the happy medium. And like I said, it started is a bunch of nuance in these things. Final words. Be human first. This is, like I said, this isn't about getting your way. This isn't about bending the world to your will. It's about finding ways to work together with people better, and just be human about it. It's about finding a way to collaborate, not manipulate. The other thing too, I am huge on, one of my life mottos is pick your battles. Like I said, some people have bad days. Some things aren't worth really bringing up if it's not worth the energy. So let the small things go and just focus on the big things, because that's another thing too. If you call out every single thing aggressively, people are just going to tune you out or get bothered by you. So if you hold back and only pick the things that are really important, people are more likely to listen up. And then one thing is, it's a learned skill. And I want you to start small and work your way up. So a heartfelt call to action here. There's a couple of things that you can definitely start to apply, but unless you have a difficult conversation in the next, let's say before the end of the day Friday, I want you to have one challenging conversation, whether it's telling your neighbor to take the Christmas lights off because it's March or anything else like that. Find something simple, but I want you to pick one conversation in your life that it makes you slightly uncomfortable. Maybe it's a 2 out of 10. You do that, and either one or two things are going to happen. The conversation is going to go your way, and you'll feel great about it. And you've realized you've gotten your first win, and this is something that makes a huge difference, and it's not as big of a deal as you make it out to be in your head. The second is it doesn't go your way, and you realize it's not a huge deal. So with that, I want you to get more wins. Let me know if you have any questions, but does it count with your toddler? I don't have any kids yet, so I don't want to answer that. And so I really appreciate everyone hopping on today. I get time for questions. Two options if you want to work with me a little bit more. I do custom sessions for CS teams. I'm working with a lot of industry leaders here. Then I have an on-demand program too. You can find info on my website. And I'm going to throw in a few links here, but my on-demand program, I'm throwing in a 50% off coupon if you want it before the end of the week. So thank you so much. This is great.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan. Yes, please go ahead and submit your questions. If you could drop them into the Q&A tab, that would be great. So just so we can more easily keep track of them. And so we have a few minutes to do some questions, and let's see. You talked about kind of interdepartmental conflicts. How do you recommend handling situations where there's a conflict between what the customer wants and what your own company thinks is best?
Yeah, I think we all feel that at times, and that's probably one of the most challenging ones. So I think with that, the first gut feeling is talking to your boss about it. And like that's our job as CSMs is like advocating for our customers and doing the right thing. So it's a textbook difficult conversation. So I'd say go back. A lot of these principles will work in something like that, but like making a strong case for your customer. Sometimes there's disagreement there, but I think you have to be that that broker in between the two. But I think it's like escalated. And then with any conversation like that, like there's only so much you can do in an organization. I'll fully admit that. But as long as you can put your head on the pillow and know like you've done everything you can. And in the same reverse thing too, when you're having these conversations, like if you were to have your behavior recorded on a conversation like this, and you're fine if your CEO saw it and you're like, okay, I did everything by the book and I know I was being kind and respectful the whole time, like that's fine. So those are like a couple points. I hope that rambling helped a little bit.
No, I think that was good. Um, we have a question that says best tips to handle conflict when customers who are difficult and just want to yell at you and have over their anger.
One more time with that.
Best tips to handle conflict when customers who are very difficult just want to yell at you.
If they do yell at you, then it's you have to have that conversation of, hey, this is a professional relationship. We can't work like this. So that's a clear boundary where you can't have an abusive relationship like that. That's another thing you want to escalate that to your boss, but like it's not cool. Where it creates some challenges because I didn't mention this, but like people treat you the way you let them treat you, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's see. I have a question that says, how do you handle customers that always copy the COO, CEO on every email?
Ouch. I Okay, so I have a good scenario where I talked about that like 5K renewal that was absolutely horrible. I did everything by the book, tried to be respectful, maintained everything was professional as possible. But no matter what I told this person, he was going to be extremely upset. He reached out to my founder, reached out to a lot of people. But I like, if you can, it's the same thing. If you are being professional, respectful, doing things by the book, you're not responsible for someone else's reaction. That's maybe I should have called that out a little bit more in this presentation, and it's something I include in my other stuff. But like, you're not responsible for that person's reaction.
I think that makes
Start
sense.
seeing their CEO. I love the Uno reverse card. Who was that? Um, Bree, love it. What's up, Bree?
Um, our next question, after a tough conversation, what steps do you recommend taking to ensure that the relationship moves forward positively afterwards?
That's a good point, and I think it's critical too. Where I think following some of these steps, and if it's coming from a good place, I think that is a helpful thing. Like starting with that empathy and things like that. But like out of the box idea, I know everyone works. A lot of us work remote, but even if you get like lunch or a coffee with a person or do something that's like not work related, that can make things go a little bit better. Where you get to know each other as humans, that can be incredibly powerful.
That makes sense. So many questions coming in. Let's see.
I have a lot of
Um,
questions.
I know we would have to do a follow-up Q&A session here. Um, let's see. How do you take things, how do you not take things personally when a customer is upset?
That was a challenge for me too. I think something like that sound like a broken record, but like if you know you've done things the right way, you might feel a little bit better. And this was something that helped me a lot with like I hate losing. So like anytime I had churn, I'd take it so personally and it would ruin my weekend. And I was talking to someone that worked for me and she was um like a superstar athlete. And she said, our hockey team, like if we did our best and didn't come up and we came up short, a break didn't go our way, we would still be happy about it because we gave it our absolute all and we could rest on that. So like same way, if you're doing things the right way, you can't completely like you can't take it home with you. Easier said than done. I've done a lot of work on that too.
Yeah. We have one that's about managing a team. So how do you have any thoughts on how best to share feedback with an employee who has reacted defensively or counterproductively on a call with a customer because they got too heated on that
Yeah,
call?
definitely. That is a good one for that. I have a lot more stuff on that, so shoot me a note after this. But for the feedback thing, always go. I talked earlier about the facts versus feelings. Always start in any feedback, like try and keep it there of this is exactly what happened, not like this is how we felt about it. It makes a huge difference. So that's like a quick tip, but feel free to shoot me a note. I'm happy to go a little deeper on that.
Okay. Um, there's so many good questions. Um, let's see. All right. Let's see. How do you handle telling a customer um they might be a bad fit for your product?
Your sales rep should have done it. Um, yeah, that typically that creates a lot of problems in CS. So I would talk with the commercial person, try and get an understanding of that goes back to that get the history. Understand what they were looking to buy for. I'd be interested why you think they're the wrong fit. But it definitely can happen. But I think trying to express that and say maybe they're like insistent on doing something one way, and that's where as a CSM you think about yourself as a personal trainer, where if I'm working with someone and they're not willing to either do things in a certain way, it's not going to go very far. And that's something where like I should have. This is another topic I go even longer on. Is if you just let your customers dictate the pace and they say, well, I don't want to run, I don't want to do abs, I don't want to lift, like nothing good is going to happen of that. So it's very much important there.
Got it. I know you talked about like if a conversation becomes kind of abusive, you definitely escalate that. But how do you decide when it's time to escalate a convo to higher management? And what's kind of the best way to make that transition smooth?
My line in the sand is if I haven't been able to resolve it with the other person, I always that was kind of my thing. I always tried to solve things one to one first. That tends to answer a lot of the things because sometimes if the person um, escalates it right away without giving you a chance, that can set things back a little bit. So I'd have that conversation with a person first, and then I've been on situations where both the leaderships of both parties had to be involved and things like that too. But once again, if you do everything by the book and you're respectful, like you got nothing to worry about.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I don't know. Let's see. One more last question before we close out. What happens when you have a customer that seems to not accept an alternative options? Like they keep pushing back and asking, their keep pushing back to their initial ask and doesn't seem satisfied with what you can offer.
Um, Maybe taking the time to understand like what's driving that, what's the force behind it. Was a really good advice I got from a former leader that I worked for is when I was newer in my career. Someone would ask about a feature and I'd say, oh, we can do that, blah, blah, blah. He would every single time be like, oh, why is that important? What are you trying to do? Because maybe there's a way that you can do something without like the math example of you can get, you know, 1 + 9 = 10, 5 + 5 = 10. Maybe there's a few different ways to do it. So I would try and position it around what's the outcome they're looking for, not what's the specific way to get there, because that kind of goes to the other point I was talking about earlier, where level it or anchor it on that mutual goal of like, hey, this is the destination. Maybe we need to get there in a different way. Because that's I'm hoping the important part, not about doing something in a certain way.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan. That brings us to the end of our time here today. Like I said, we do have a lot of questions, so maybe we could talk about tackling some of these offline
Yeah, for sure.
or in another forum. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We will be sending out a link to the recording and follow-up email tomorrow with a PDF of the slides so you all can review it again, share with your colleagues. At the end of this webinar, we'll have a survey pop up. We'd appreciate it if you would just take a moment to provide your feedback on this webinar so we can continue to bring things that you're interested in. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. And thanks again, Ryan.
Thanks all. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.